I was fired 3 days before my pension vested. Just 3 days. 29 years and 362 days of loyal service. They tossed me out like garbage. And the worst part? I didn't even see it coming. I remember sitting in my car, staring at the cardboard box in my lap. Inside were my family photos, a mug that said "World's Best Dad," a little cactus from my desk, and the pen I'd used to sign my first contract nearly 3 decades ago. I looked up at the building I gave my life to, Wendell Manufacturing, and I felt nothing. Not anger. Not pain. Just nothing. Then I made one phone call. I wasn't even sure if he'd pick up. It had been years. But when the voice on the other end said, "Hello," I took a deep breath and said, "It's me." They finally did it. "I'm out." There was silence. Then he said, "I'm on my way." You're probably wondering who I called, and why that call changed everything. But before I tell you what happened next, I need to take you back to where it all began. Before the box. Before the betrayal. Back to the beginning, when I still believed people like my boss couldn't be that cruel. My name's Frank Harris. I started working at Wendell Manufacturing when I was 22. I was just a skinny kid from Detroit with a big heart and a bigger dream, to give my future family a life better than the one I grew up with. My first day at Wendell was nothing special. I showed up early, wore a shirt 2 sizes too big, and didn't even know where the break room was. I was just happy to be there. I remember an older guy, Tom Green, shaking my hand and saying, "Stick around, kid. This place will be good to you if you're good to it." And so I was. I showed up early every day. I never called in sick unless I was on death's doorstep. I volunteered for the tough jobs. Night shifts. Holiday coverage. I even worked Christmas Eve 3 years in a row so other folks could be home with their kids. I believed in paying it forward. Life wasn't easy, but I was proud. I married my high school sweetheart, Lisa. She worked nights at the diner while I worked days at the plant. We had 2 boys, Jeremy and Caleb. We couldn't afford much, but there was always food on the table and laughter in the house. I remember one Christmas when Caleb was 5. He wanted a red bike with flames on the side. We didn't have the money, so I spent every lunch break that month doing odd jobs for the guys around the plant. Fixed one guy's fence, helped another move furniture, even babysat for my supervisor's twins one Saturday. I scraped together enough cash to buy that bike. And when Caleb saw it under the tree, he screamed like he'd won the lottery. That moment, that made everything worth it. Over the years, I worked my way up. I wasn't flashy. I wasn't the loudest voice in the room. But people respected me. I trained dozens of new hires. I taught them how to operate the machines, how to stay safe, how to treat each other right. I always told them, the work is hard, but the people make it easier. There was one guy, Jake, who came in fresh out of high school. He had a short temper and a chip on his shoulder. Everyone avoided him. But I saw something in him. I talked to him, worked beside him, showed him patience. One day, after a double shift, he told me, "You're the first person who ever made me feel like I wasn't just a screw-up." That's what it was about for me. Not just the paycheck. Not even the pension, really. It was about making a place feel like home. And for 29 years, it was. Until the company was bought by a new CEO. His name was Gregory Blake. Young, shiny suit, big smile, firm handshake. The kind of guy who called everyone buddy and made jokes about working from the golf course. At first, we thought he was harmless. He held a town hall meeting his first week and said, "We're a family here. And I take care of my family." But little by little, things started to change. Overtime was slashed. Break times were shortened. Departments were restructured, which usually meant someone got canned. Benefits were cut. I kept my head down. Told myself to just ride it out. I was so close to 30 years. So close to that pension. I even tried to talk to Blake once. I caught him in the hallway and said, "Sir, some of the guys are worried about. He cut me off. Frank, right? You've been here, what, 1,000 years? I smiled politely. 29, sir. Well, just keep doing your thing. We'll take care of you. I should have known then. 3 days before my pension was set to vest, Blake called me into his office. Said it was a routine review. I didn't think twice. When I walked in, there were 2 people sitting with him. One was from HR. The other was some lawyer-looking guy with slicked-back hair and dead eyes. Frank, Blake said, this is difficult, but we're going to have to let you go. Effective immediately. My ears started ringing. What? I said. He slid a folder across the desk. We've reviewed your performance, Anne. Performance? I said, louder now. I've never even had a warning. Not once. The HR woman looked away. The lawyer didn't blink. This is not a reflection of your character, Blake said, in that same empty voice he used at the town hall. It's just a business decision. I stood there, numb. I couldn't move. Blake smiled. We're offering a modest severance. You can take the rest of the day to pack your things. 3 days. 3 days. They waited until I was right at the finish line. So the company wouldn't have to pay me my full pension. So they could save a few bucks. I didn't say a word. I walked out of that office, past people I'd worked with for decades, past my locker, past the break room where I once organized birthday parties and retirement send-offs. I put my things in a box. And I walked out. That's when I sat in my car and made the call. Hello. It's me. They finally did it. I'm out. Silence. Then, I'm on my way. What happened next changed everything. But before I tell you about that, let me take you back to how I met the person I called. Because nothing about this story makes sense without him. It started 12 years ago, on a Tuesday that should have been like any other. It was the middle of a hot July, and the factory's air conditioning was barely keeping up. I was on my lunch break, eating a tuna sandwich and half reading a newspaper when I heard someone cursing outside. I got up and walked out to the loading dock, where I saw a teenage boy, probably 17, struggling with a busted-up bicycle. His hands were covered in grease, and he was sweating buckets. You okay, kid? I asked. He looked up, startled. Yeah. I mean, no. My chain popped, and I'm already late for work. Where do you work? I asked. Burger Shack. Across town. That's a long ride in this heat. He wiped his forehead. Gotta do what you gotta do. I looked at his bike. I knew I could fix it. Hang tight, I said. I went to my trunk and grabbed some tools. Sat down on the pavement and got to work. 10 minutes later, the chain was back on, adjusted properly, and I even greased it for good measure. The kid stared at me. Why'd you help me? I shrugged. Someone helped me once. Just paying it forward. He extended his hand. I'm Marcus. Frank. He smiled. You're all right, Frank. He rode off, and I figured I'd never see him again. I was wrong. A year later, he showed up at Wendell. He'd applied for an entry-level job. Listed me as a reference. He got the job. He became like a second son to me. I taught him everything I knew. Not just about the machines, but about life. And now, 12 years later, he was the one I called when everything fell apart. I didn't know what he was going to do. I didn't even know if there was anything to do. But I had no idea that Marcus had become someone far more powerful than I'd ever imagined. And I had no idea what was about to happen next. The knock on my front door came just as the sun was dipping below the horizon. I hadn't moved much since I got home. The box from my desk still sat on the kitchen table, untouched. Lisa kept asking if I was okay, but I didn't have any words for her yet. What could I even say? That my life's work had just been erased like it meant nothing? I opened the door, and there he was, Marcus. He looked different. Sharper. He wore a suit now, not some wrinkled company t-shirt with grease on his hands. His beard was trimmed, and his posture screamed confidence. But when he looked at me, his eyes were still the same. Kind. Fierce. Loyal. "I'm sorry, Frank," he said, stepping inside without asking. "This is messed up. It's so messed up." I nodded. "Yeah, it is." He looked at the box on the table. "They really did it, huh? 3 days before your pension." "Yep." Said it was a performance issue. I snorted. In 29 years, I never got written up. Not once. Marcus sat down across from me and tapped his fingers on the table. "They planned this. This wasn't random. They waited until the last possible second so they wouldn't have to pay out your pension. It's dirty, and they know it." I didn't say anything. I just stared at my calloused hands. Hands that had worked thousands of shifts, repaired thousands of machines, shaken the hands of hundreds of co-workers, said goodbye to friends retiring with pride and dignity. I should have been one of them. Then Marcus said something that made me look up. "I'm going to fix this." I chuckled bitterly. "You can't fix this, kid. It's done. They made sure of that." He leaned forward. "You remember when you helped me fix my bike that day? You didn't know me. You had no reason to do it. But you did it anyway. That moment changed my life, Frank." He pulled out his phone and opened an email. "You know what I've been doing the last couple years, right?" I shrugged. "Heard you left Wendell. Heard you were working in tech or something." He turned the screen toward me. "I started a company. Got lucky with an app. Sold it. Now I run a startup that partners with major logistics firms, Wendell included." I blinked. "Wait, you work with Wendell?" Marcus grinned. "Not just work with. I'm one of their biggest clients. My company's contracts are worth millions to them." That made me sit up. "You serious?" "Dead serious," he said. "And I've got enough leverage to make them sweat." He leaned back and crossed his arms. "But I'm not just going to rattle their cage. We're going to do this right. We're going to be smart. Strategic. You gave 29 years to that company, Frank. You didn't just earn a pension. You earned respect. It's time they learned what it means to burn the wrong bridge." For the first time all day, I felt something other than defeat. I felt hope. "What do you have in mind?" Marcus smiled. "Let me show you." The next few days were a blur. Marcus moved fast, faster than I thought possible. First, he connected me with a labor attorney named Sarah who specialized in wrongful terminations. She was sharp as a tack and had the kind of quiet confidence that made people nervous in the best way. She looked over the severance paperwork Wendell gave me and shook her head. "This is laughable. They were counting on you being too tired or too scared to fight back." She asked for every document I had. Pay stubs, work reviews, emails, even text messages. I gave her everything. Meanwhile, Marcus started pulling strings. He called board members, sent emails, had friendly chats with supply chain directors at Wendell who, it turned out, really didn't want to lose his business. He wasn't threatening them, yet, but he was letting them know that something very, very wrong had happened. "I'm not just doing this for you," Marcus told me one night over coffee. "This kind of thing happens to workers all over the country. You're just one of thousands. But if we play this right, we can make your story go viral. We can make them afraid to do it again." I stared into my cup. "I don't want to be famous. I just want what I earned." "You'll get it," he said. "And maybe a whole lot more." At first, Lisa was skeptical. "You really think this will work?" she asked me when we were alone. "I don't know," I admitted. But Marcus, he's not a kid anymore. He's got power. He's using it the right way. She squeezed my hand. Just don't let them take any more of you, Frank. I didn't plan to. 1 week after my termination, Marcus invited me to a charity gala he was attending downtown. It was being hosted by a tech consortium, but he said some people from Wendell would be there, too. I wasn't sure if I wanted to go. Showing up at some fancy event, dressed in the one suit I hadn't worn since Jeremy's wedding, made me feel like an outsider. But Marcus insisted. Trust me, he said. You'll want to be there. The ballroom was massive. Crystal chandeliers. Waiters in tuxedos. Wine glasses that cost more than my first car. I stood awkwardly by the edge of the room while Marcus worked the crowd like a pro. At some point, he pulled me over and introduced me to a man in a grey suit with slick hair and a fake smile. Frank, this is Nathan Lang. He's on Wendell's board of directors. Lang extended a hand. A pleasure. I shook it. His grip was weak. No calluses. Likewise, I said. Marcus smiled coolly. Frank worked at Wendell for 29 years. You ever hear about what happened to him last week? Lang looked uncomfortable. I heard something about a restructuring. Marcus's voice sharpened. He was fired 3 days before his pension vested. No warnings. No cause. Just gone. Lang cleared his throat. Well, I'm sure there were reasons. Oh, I'm sure there were, Marcus said, his tone light but dangerous. And I'm also sure your shareholders wouldn't love hearing about those reasons in the Wall Street Journal. Especially when one of your major clients starts asking questions about your labor practices. Lang looked like he'd swallowed a lemon. Marcus leaned in just a little. You might want to talk to Gregory Blake. Tell him the man he screwed over isn't alone. And he's not staying quiet. Lang didn't reply. He just nodded stiffly and walked away. I looked at Marcus. You're playing with fire. He smiled. No, Frank. They are. A few days later, I got a call from Sarah, the attorney. Her voice was tight. Frank, I just got word from Wendell's legal team. They want to settle. My heart skipped. Settle how? They're offering your full pension, plus a severance package 5 times the original amount, and a letter of apology signed by Blake himself. But there's a catch. I waited. They want you to sign a non-disclosure agreement. No interviews. No talking about what happened. Ever. I sat in silence. They're scared, Frank, she said gently. That means we're winning. But it's your call. You can take the deal, or we go public. Before I could answer, my phone buzzed again. It was Marcus. Turn on the news, he said. I grabbed the remote and flipped to the local station. And that's when everything changed. On the screen was Gregory Blake. Sweaty. Angry. Dodging cameras outside of Wendell's headquarters as a reporter shouted questions. On the screen was Gregory Blake. Sweaty. Angry. Dodging cameras outside of Wendell's headquarters as a reporter shouted questions. Is it true you terminated an employee to avoid pension payments? Are you aware of the growing boycott by your logistics partners? Do you plan to resign? I stood frozen. Then the camera panned to a protest forming outside the building. And right at the front of the crowd was someone holding a giant sign with my name on it. That's when I realized this wasn't just about me anymore. And we were just getting started. The next morning, my face was on TV. Local news stations picked up the story and ran with it. Detroit man fired days before pension, sparks outrage. Then it hit the internet. Reddit threads, Twitter rants, TikTok videos with angry voiceovers, hashtags like #JusticeForFrank, #corporate greed, and #pension theft. My phone blew up with calls, messages, people from the factory, neighbors, even strangers across the country thanking me for standing up. Except I hadn't done anything, yet. I stood on my front porch, coffee in hand, watching a newsvan drive by and slow to a crawl in front of the house. Lisa peeked through the blinds. "Frank," she whispered, "you're famous." I shook my head. I didn't ask for any of this. She stepped beside me. "I know. But maybe it asked for you." I wanted to believe her. Marcus came by later that morning, laptop under one arm, grin like a kid on Christmas. "Frank, you've officially gone viral. I mean, really viral. You're trending in 4 states. You've got interviews being requested from news anchors and 2 podcasts. Even a documentary filmmaker emailed." I rubbed my forehead. "I just wanted my pension." He nodded. "Serious now. And now you might help save other people's pensions too. You started something, Frank. And you don't have to carry it alone. That's what people like me are for." We went inside. He opened his laptop and started clicking through emails. "Listen to this. This woman from Illinois wrote that her dad lost his pension the same way. She's crying in the email. People are furious. They're sharing their own stories. You've tapped into something real." Just then, the doorbell rang. I opened it to find a young man in a brown uniform holding an envelope. "Frank Harris?" he asked. "Yeah." "Personal delivery. Sign here." I signed the slip, took the envelope, and thanked him. Closed the door. Inside was a letter, stamped with Wendell Manufacturing's logo. I sat down at the table. Marcus leaned over my shoulder as I opened it. "Dear Mr. Harris, in light of recent events and following a full internal review, we have decided to reinstate your full pension, effective immediately. Furthermore, we would like to offer a public apology and extended benefits for the next 12 months, should you choose to accept them. We ask only that you sign the enclosed non-disclosure agreement and refrain from further public discussion of internal company decisions. Sincerely, Gregory Blake, CEO, Wendell Manufacturing." Marcus whistled. "That's desperation right there." Lisa looked hopeful. "This is what you wanted, Frank. They're giving you what you earned." But I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. It was too clean. Too easy. Like a magician trying to make you look at the wrong hand. "They're trying to silence me," I said quietly. Marcus nodded. "Exactly." Sarah, the lawyer, called not long after. "They're scared of discovery, Frank. If this went to court, they'd have to hand over internal emails, memos, performance records. There might be proof they planned this. And if that gets out, that's real damage to their brand. Not to mention shareholder trust." "So what are my options?" I asked. She paused. "If you want to be done, take the deal. You'll get your pension, a solid chunk of change, and peace. But if you want to fight, really fight, then we go public. And it's going to get loud." Lisa touched my arm. "It's your call, honey. But whatever you choose, I'm with you." I looked around the room, at my wife, at Marcus, at the framed photos of my boys on the wall. One showed Caleb as a little kid riding that red bike. The one I broke my back to afford. I stood up. "Let's get loud." By the end of the week, things had exploded. Marcus helped me release a video. Nothing fancy, just me, sitting at my kitchen table, telling my story. Start to finish. No script. No makeup. Just truth. It got 2 million views in 3 days. I started getting emails from labor unions. Invitations to speak at worker advocacy events. And then something unexpected happened. Former employees from Wendell started reaching out, lots of them. One guy named Alan said they did the same thing to him, only 6 months before his pension vested. A woman named Maria said she was pushed out after returning from maternity leave. Another man said he was fired for budget cuts only to be replaced by someone younger 2 weeks later. We compiled them into a document. Sarah called it Pattern of Behavior. And with every story, the company's mask cracked a little more. Blake, on the other hand, was spiraling. He gave a press statement saying Wendell was committed to fairness and integrity, but reporters immediately picked it apart. Shareholders started asking questions. A couple of big clients announced they were re-evaluating their contracts, including Marcus's company. Then came the first extreme twist. I was in the middle of making breakfast when my phone buzzed. It was Marcus. His voice was tense. "Frank, you need to sit down." "Why? What happened?" "I just got an email from a guy named Jeff Martin. Used to be Blake's assistant. Said he's got something you need to see." I blinked. "What is it?" "It's a document. From 6 months ago. A list of employees scheduled for pre-pension termination review." Marcus paused. "Your name's on it." I felt the floor tilt. "They planned it, Frank. All of it. They always planned it." The document came through a few hours later. It was real. Company letterhead. Confidential stamp. Blake's signature at the bottom. It listed 9 names. Mine was the third. Beside each was a column, termination justification strategy. Mine read, justification, alleged performance concerns, fabricated, if necessary. Risk level, low. Pension vest date, May 4th. Target termination, May 1st. My hands trembled as I read it. I wasn't a name to them. I was a number on a chart. I sent it to Sarah. She called 5 minutes later. "This changes everything. This is your silver bullet, Frank." Lisa stood beside me in the kitchen, speechless. Her eyes were red. She'd seen me come home late, bruised, exhausted, aching, year after year. And now she saw this. "I don't care about the money anymore," I said. "I want the truth out." Sarah's voice was steely. "Then it's time to burn their house down." We planned the next move carefully. Sarah filed a formal complaint with the Department of Labor. Marcus handed off the document to a journalist he trusted, a guy named Ray Donovan who'd broken corporate scandals before. Ray agreed to do a deep dive. We didn't have to wait long. 4 days later, the Detroit Sentinel published a front-page exposé titled, "Inside Wendell: How a Company Systematically Fired Workers to Avoid Paying Pensions." The story hit like a bomb. There were quotes from insiders, screenshots of emails, and even a leaked voicemail from Blake joking about trimming the fat before the payout window. News trucks lined up outside Wendell's headquarters. Employees staged a walkout. The stock dipped 5 points. Sponsors started backing away. That night, I got another knock on the door. I opened it to find a man in a dark blue windbreaker. He held up a badge. "Mr. Frank Harris." I nodded slowly. "Yes. I'm Agent Porter with the Department of Labor. We need to ask you some questions. Do you have a few minutes?" Lisa's face went pale. I stepped back and opened the door. "Of course," I said. "Come in." Because if they thought this was the end of the story, they were about to find out it was only the beginning. Agent Porter took off his windbreaker and laid a notepad on the kitchen table. He was calm, professional, the kind of man who looked like he'd seen a lot and didn't get rattled easily. "We've been monitoring Wendell Manufacturing for a while now," he said, clicking his pen. "You might have just handed us the thread we needed to pull." I sat across from him, Lisa to my right, Marcus leaning in from the living room doorway. The room was quiet except for the ticking of the kitchen clock and the soft scratch of Porter's pen as he took notes. "We're talking pension fraud," he continued. "Systemic age discrimination, wrongful termination, breach of labor laws, the list goes on. But that document your friend Marcus received? That could blow the case wide open." I folded my hands tightly. "I want to help. Not just for me. For everyone they did this to." "You're already helping," Porter said. "Now, here's what I need." For the next 2 hours, I gave him everything. I answered every question, explained every conversation. I even remembered little details I thought I'd forgotten, Like the moment HR stopped smiling at me in the hallway, or the week they started randomly reviewing old time cards. By the time Agent Porter stood to leave, he looked more serious than ever. "We're building a case," he said. "It's going to take time, and it won't be easy. But what you've done here, Frank, it matters. I'll be in touch." And just like that, he was gone. I closed the door and leaned against it, drained. Lisa wrapped her arms around me. "Whatever happens next, you're not in this alone." Marcus spoke up. "You know what's wild? That document. Someone inside the company had to send that. Someone finally broke ranks." He was right. Somewhere in that building, someone had seen the injustice and done something about it. And that's when it hit me, the tide was turning. For the first time, they were on defense. But the next day, the tide nearly swept us under. I was on my way to pick up a prescription for Lisa when a sleek black car pulled up alongside me at a red light. Tinted windows. No plates. The passenger window rolled down slowly, and a man in a grey suit leaned out. "Mr. Harris," he said, voice low and calm. I looked over, eyebrows raised. "Who's asking?" "I represent Mr. Blake. He'd like to speak with you privately." I laughed without humor. "Tell him he can speak through my lawyer." The man didn't blink. "He's prepared to make a substantial offer. More than just your pension. A buyout. A clean slate. All we ask is your cooperation and silence." The light turned green, but I didn't move. I stared at him for a long second. "I've already been bought and sold for 3 decades, I said quietly. "I'm not for sale anymore." He didn't answer. He just rolled up the window, and the car peeled off. I looked over, eyebrows raised. "Who's asking?" "I represent Mr. Blake. He'd like to speak with you privately." I laughed without humor. "Tell him he can speak through my lawyer." The man didn't blink. "He's prepared to make a substantial offer. More than just your pension. A buyout. A clean slate. All we ask is your cooperation and silence." The light turned green, but I didn't move. I stared at him for a long second. "I've already been bought and sold for 3 decades, I said quietly. "I'm not for sale anymore." He didn't answer. He just rolled up the window, and the car peeled off. When I got home, I told Marcus and Sarah everything. "They're rattled," Marcus said. "They thought you'd fold." Sarah frowned. "That's borderline intimidation. I'll document it." But she didn't have time to file the report. Because less than 24 hours later, they came after Marcus. He called me from his office, his voice shaken. "Frank, they froze my company's contracts with Wendell. Every single one. Claimed we breached terms. We didn't, but they're using some loophole clause. I just lost 3 major projects overnight." "What?" "Marcus, I'm so sorry." "No. Don't be," he cut in. "I knew this might happen. But I didn't expect them to go this hard, this fast. Can you fight it?" "I've got lawyers. We're already pushing back. But Frank, they're trying to make me regret backing you. Trying to scare me off." I closed my eyes and exhaled. "They don't know who they're dealing with," Marcus said, and this time, his voice was steel again. "They think I'm scared? They've got no idea what's coming." The next day, he launched Project Payback. It started with a website, simple, bold, and brutal. www.wendellfiles.com. It listed my story, other whistleblowers, leaked documents, and videos of workers sharing their experiences. We got legal clearance on every post. Within a week, the site had over 10 million views. Then came the petition. Force Wendell to pay what's owed. It hit 500,000 signatures in 48 hours. A group of former employees organized a protest downtown. Union leaders joined in. Media vans circled the block. Blake, meanwhile, went silent. No statements. No interviews. His social media pages went dark. The company tried spinning it, calling it a coordinated misinformation campaign. But people weren't buying it anymore. A week later, the Detroit Sentinel published a follow-up article with the headline, "Sources say DOJ reviewing Wendell for criminal activity." And that night, something strange happened. Around 10 p.m., I was sitting on the porch, thinking, when I saw headlights pull into my driveway. A man stepped out slowly. I recognized him instantly. Tom Green. He was retired now, lived 3 towns over. But once upon a time, he was the one who shook my hand on my first day at Wendell and said, "Stick around, kid." He looked older, grayer, but his eyes still had that same fire. "Tom," I said, stunned. "What are you doing here?" He stepped up onto the porch and held out a flash drive. "I saw your video," he said. "I saw what they did to you. And it made me sick." "What is this?" "Insurance," he said quietly. "Back in the day, I was in HR. Not by choice, I got pushed off the floor after my back gave out. But I kept records. Emails. Meeting minutes. Stuff I wasn't supposed to save." He looked me dead in the eye. "You're not the first, Frank. And you won't be the last, unless we stop them." I took the flash drive from his hand. It felt heavier than it should have. Inside that tiny plastic stick was a storm waiting to be unleashed. And that's exactly what we were about to do, because inside those files, buried deep, was something we never expected to find. Something that would rock Wendell Manufacturing from the inside out, and put Gregory Blake exactly where he belonged. The flash drive sat untouched for a full hour. I just stared at it. This little plastic thing, no bigger than my thumb, held the weight of nearly 3 decades of broken promises, stolen pensions, and corporate lies. Somewhere inside those files was the truth. And truth, once seen, can't be unseen. Marcus finally broke the silence. "We open it now." He plugged it into his laptop with hands far steadier than mine. Tom Green leaned over, pointing at a folder labeled confidential_internal. It was dated 2013. "Start there," he said. Inside were documents, hundreds of them. Meeting notes, internal memos, emails, HR evaluations marked with codes we didn't understand. Then came the spreadsheets. Rows upon rows of names, employee ID numbers, hire dates, age, pension vesting timelines. And beside some of those names, the same 2 letters over and over again. TR. "What's TR?" I asked. Tom spoke quietly. "Termination recommended." We found my name, Alan's, Maria's, dozens of others I recognized from the factory floor. But the deeper we looked, the more horrifying it became. One file, simply titled Phase R, hit us like a brick wall. It was a PowerPoint presentation, a pitch deck, made by Wendell's executive team. Slide 1, Phase R, Risk Reduction Plan. Slide 2, Objective, reduce long-term financial liability by targeting high-cost legacy employees before pension obligations vest. Slide 3, a chart titled Target Profiles. It had pictures of workers, smiling faces, me among them. "Jesus Christ," Marcus whispered. "They hunted you." The next slide was worse. Projected savings, $4.7 million over 5 years. I stood up from the table and backed away. I couldn't look anymore. "They used us like machines," I said. "And when we ran too long or cost too much to maintain, they just tossed us." Lisa sat on the couch, one hand over her mouth. Her eyes glistened with tears, not just for me, but for all the people behind those numbers. Marcus stood and unplugged the drive. "We take this to the press," he said, "and to the feds." Tom nodded. "It's time." Sarah, our lawyer, nearly choked when she saw the files. "This is beyond civil. This is criminal. These slides are admissions. They knew. They plotted. They executed. This is conspiracy to defraud employees on a mass scale. She immediately contacted a federal prosecutor she'd worked with years ago. Within hours, a full investigative task force was involved. The Department of Labor, the DOJ, even the IRS started sniffing around. But the files held one more twist. One final slide at the end of the phase R deck. Slide 12, Project Overseer, Executive Approval Required. Final sign-off, Gregory Blake. And under it was a digital signature, time-stamped, verified. Blake wasn't just aware, he ordered it. That weekend, Marcus took me downtown for a small meeting. I expected a couple union guys, maybe a journalist or two. Instead, the building we pulled up to was packed. Cameras, reporters, flashbulbs going off, chants echoing through the streets. We are frank. Pay the pensions. Blake must go. I froze in the parking lot. I can't walk into that. Marcus looked me square in the eye. Frank, you already did. The moment you stood up. He opened the trunk and handed me a suit jacket. Put this on. You're the voice of thousands now. You're not just a guy who got fired, you're a symbol. Inside the building, we were ushered up to a panel discussion hosted by Labor Now, a national worker advocacy group. They gave me a seat at the table. I told my story again, but this time, I ended it differently. I thought this was just about me, I said into the MIC, but it's not. It's about all of us who've worked our whole lives and got discarded like we were nothing. It's about every handshake that meant something, every long shift, every night we limped home too tired to stand. The room was silent. I held up a copy of the Phase R slides. This isn't just a scandal. It's a system. And today, it ends. The crowd erupted. Reporters shoved mics in my face. But I just sat there, breathless. Afterwards, Marcus came over. We got them, Frank. They know it. And they did know. The next day, Blake was forced to resign. Wendell's stock plummeted. Federal agents raided the headquarters. Former executives were subpoenaed. Class action lawsuits piled up so fast, the company had to shut down public relations altogether. But even in the chaos, there was peace. Alan called. So did Maria. And dozens of others. Some got settlements. Some got their pensions reinstated. All of them got their voices back. And I got something else. One evening, I was sitting on the porch, watching the sun dip below the trees, when a familiar red truck pulled into the driveway. Out stepped a boy in a baseball cap. A little older now. Taller. But I'd know that face anywhere. Caleb. He grinned as he walked up. Heard you've been busy. I chuckled. You could say that. He reached into his backpack and pulled out a small black box. Got something for you. I opened it. It was a shiny brass nameplate, the kind you'd see on an office desk. It read, Frank Harris, the man who fought back. I stared at it for a long time. My throat tightened. You proud of me, son? I asked quietly. He looked me dead in the eye. Dad, the whole country is. Just then, Marcus came out onto the porch, phone in hand. He had that look again. That storm's coming look. What is it? I asked. He held up the phone. You need to see this. I took it. On the screen was an email. Sent from an anonymous source. Subject, Wendell wasn't the only one. Attached was a list of 7 other companies. And beside each one, active, Phase R initiative. I looked at Marcus. He nodded slowly. You ready to go bigger? He asked. I looked out at the horizon and smiled. Let's finish what we started. The next morning felt different. I woke up to a house full of light, the smell of coffee in the air, and birds chirping outside like nothing in the world had gone sideways. But my phone buzzed non-stop. Emails, missed calls, news alerts. Everywhere I looked, my name was there. Frank Harris, the pension patriot. Wendell's whistleblower inspires national probe. Phase R, the scandal spreading across corporate America. But it wasn't about me anymore, not really. Because that anonymous email? It blew the doors wide open. 7 other companies. 7 more Phase R initiatives. 7 more systems of quiet cruelty, hidden behind suits and spreadsheets. Each one with carefully calculated plans to fire aging employees right before their pensions vested. Marcus and I sat at the dining table, reviewing the list. Each name felt like a gut punch. Logistics giants, warehouse chains, a telecom provider, massive corporations with smiling commercials and "We Care" slogans. And behind closed doors? The same lies. The same theft. These aren't accidents, Marcus said, scrolling through one document. They're business models. Sarah arrived 10 minutes later with a briefcase and her game face on. "We take it federal," she said. "Now." That afternoon, we met with the Department of Labor. Agent Porter was there, along with officials from the DOJ and SEC. The evidence we brought wasn't just strong, it was damning. Slide decks, internal memos, strategy notes just like Wendell's, all aimed at one thing, avoiding pension liability. But then came the shocker. "We've been tracking this for over a year," said a woman from the SEC. "We just couldn't get our hands on a smoking gun." Marcus raised an eyebrow. "You've got a whole fireplace now." Porter nodded grimly. "What Frank uncovered, it's the start. But it's about to get a lot bigger." They told us about the plan, a full federal task force to investigate the companies. Subpoenas, audits, interviews, and, eventually, charges. But they also told us something else. They wanted me to testify. Not just behind closed doors. In front of Congress. I blinked. "You want me to what?" Porter smiled faintly. "You've become the face of this, Frank. And we need that face to show up and speak the truth. On camera. For the whole country." A few weeks later, I stood in a dark blue suit inside the Capitol. I'd never imagined I'd be in Washington, D.C., let alone walking into a congressional hearing with senators waiting, cameras rolling, and a sea of people behind me. But there I was. Lisa was in the front row. Caleb sat beside her, suit too big for his skinny frame, eyes wide with pride. Marcus had flown in with his team. Even Tom was there, hands folded, quiet but unshakable. They called my name. I stood, walked forward, sat, and took the oath. Then I told my story again. From my first day at Wendell to the day I was let go. From the box of belongings on the kitchen table to the knock on the door from Agent Porter. From the leaked slide decks to the names on the spreadsheet. And finally, to the truth that set fire to it all. I looked them straight in the eye when I said, "We gave our lives to these companies. We kept the machines running, the lights on, the gears turning. And when the time came for them to honor their promises, they tossed us out like yesterday's trash. This isn't business. It's betrayal." The room was silent when I finished. Then, a senator leaned forward and said, "Mr. Harris, thank you for your courage. You may have just helped change the law." Over the next few months, the fallout was massive. Wendell paid out millions in back pensions. Gregory Blake was indicted on fraud, conspiracy, and labor violations. So were 5 other executives from other companies. The class action suits began pouring in. But the real victory? Congress passed a bill. The Pension Protection and Accountability Act. It made it illegal for companies to terminate employees within 1 year of their pension vesting unless independently reviewed and approved by the Department of Labor. It also mandated public disclosures of termination patterns and strengthened whistleblower protections nationwide. They named it Harris Law. I didn't want that, but they insisted. And suddenly, the name Frank Harris meant something far bigger than one man and one story. It meant protection, dignity, Justice. The day after the bill passed, I went back to the old Wendell plant. It was closed now, bought out by a smaller logistics startup. But the front gates were still there, and the gravel lot hadn't changed. I stood outside for a while, watching the wind rattle the chain-link fence. Then a car pulled up behind me. Marcus stepped out, 2 cups of coffee in hand. He handed me one. "You did it, old man." I laughed. "We did it." He nodded at the building. "You ever think about walking back in there? Maybe not to work, just to say goodbye?" I shook my head. "No need. That chapter's done." He paused, then smiled. "So what's next for Frank Harris?" I looked out over the parking lot. Thought about the families we'd helped. The retirements we'd saved. The future we'd changed. "I don't know," I said. "But whatever it is, I think it's just getting started." A few months later, I stood at a podium again, this time in a small community center. It wasn't on national TV. There were no senators, no suits, just a room full of factory workers, bus drivers, janitors, warehouse teams, and nurses. They clapped as I stepped up. One by one, they stood and raised their signs. "I am Frank. We are all Frank." I looked around the room, and for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel alone. I felt unstoppable. Because the truth is, they fired me 3 days before my pension vested. But I made a phone call. And that phone call started a fire no one could put out. Not even Gregory Blake. Not even the system that tried to break us. Because they forgot one simple thing. We built this country. And we're not going anywhere.